Time to smash it up on a Monday night. It's the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis alongside managing editor of Warchant.com, Ira Schofel. My name is Tom Lang. Ira, we've talked a whole lot via phone calls and text messages and emails over the last couple of weeks, but I've missed you in the broadcast world. How you doing tonight?
It's good to see you again. Not that I didn't enjoy last week with Jeff or all the different shows we do, but yeah, I feel the same way, man. It's good to be back together to smash it up.
It's nice, too. I can feel the energy. Tonight, I'm in the Real Talk 93.3 studios here in Tallahassee. There's an aura. Hopefully, everybody who is in the Big Bend area, obviously, is safe, and everybody who is struggling, perhaps without power and watching us off the cell tower, we send our warmest wishes to you, and we hope your evening is going to go just a little bit better over the next hour. But I can feel the positive waves of energy after a long day of practice, a Monday practice here in Tallahassee. Florida State powered through the storm. If you are a subscriber to Warchant.com, go over there now as we're talking, because Ira wrote a little novella of all of the things that went down today. That was a loaded practice on the heels of a scrimmage, Ira. A lot of guys were held out, it sounded like, or at least put on pitch counts on Saturday. But they went after it today on the practice fields, and it sounds like they got a lot of good work in.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I probably should have asked Norvell this afterwards. We asked him a bunch of other stuff. I didn't ask him specifically this, but I couldn't tell if it was like, okay, we've got to be in the indoor facility because of the hurricane that's outside. So let's do a lot of 7-on-7, 11-on-11, or if that was the plan all along. Like, I don't know. Usually, practice for people that pay attention, to our reports, of the 24, 25 periods, I don't know the exact number. Maybe there's 8 or 9 periods of 7-on-7 or 11-on-11. Maybe it's a little more or less than that. But today it felt like it was not 80% of the practice was competitive 7-on-7, 11-on-11, or 1-on-1s. And so there's a lot to write about. And it's like, where do you stop and start? I felt like, if I just end up just basically, throwing it all out there. So, but yeah, I thought that, to me, there was a lot of great, really good stuff. I thought you talked about positive energy. I actually walked away from today's practice, and I don't know how the coaches feel. They may feel completely different, but I actually walked away from today's practice feeling a little bit better about this team than maybe I have. Just I feel like there's more I feel solid about. There's more things that I feel really good about. Not that I was down on the team in the first 8 or 9 or 10 practices, but I just, I don't know. For some reason today, I felt better about this team, and I like the way they practice, really competitive, and just a lot of great reps on both sides of the ball.
That's something that we'll delve into tonight, because I haven't had a chance to be at practice yet, Ira. I can't wait to hear your opinions on what's gone on so far for Florida State in this week and a half. I think today was day 10 of camp. It was either day 10 or day 11. So a lot has happened for Florida State, but I'm not sure about all the finer details and the particulars, and I can't wait to get your opinion. If you're out there on Warchant TV, feel free to file questions away. Director Ben behind the scenes will be taking care of us here on the Monday Smash. Again, hit the like button below, subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. But if you want to put those questions in the chat, Ira will address them before the show is over. We do have to mention before, you felt better about the team today. Feel better about your insurance plans, everybody. Feel better about your insurance life with State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. I can now proudly say, Ira, I am a customer of State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. He helped me out last week with a personal need with insurance, and his office was fantastic at what they did. I called the Orange Park phone number. Director Ben, if you want to wipe that down real quick so I can see that number, it's 904-276-9535, 904-276-9535, as I will be in the Southeast here in the near future. I'll tell you guys more about that. But what's important here is the customer service was first class with State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. If you live in the state of Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, he's got you covered. And his website, I'll spell it out for you on the podcast feed. I know a lot of you listen afterwards. RussVorhis.com. That's RussVorhis.com. Ira, all right. You've talked to him. You've consulted with him. I'm now a customer. So how about that?
That's a beautiful thing. And actually, Russ sent us a really nice note last week, because Jeff must have done a great job last week selling Russ's services as well, because Russ texted us last week and said he had multiple calls and inquiries from Noles who heard about him on the Smash. And, and again, he's not just a very educated, very informed about his business, does a great job with all your insurance needs in Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, but he's also a Nole and a good guy, and he's got a really good staff, and appreciate you guys letting him know if you do call or inquire about information letting him know you heard about him on Warchant and the Monday Smash.
So once again, here on the Monday Smash, Irish O'Fell is going to be breaking down an awful lot, letting us know what he thinks 10 days into camp, 10 practices, I should say, into camp for Florida State. And Ira, I guess since you said it, since you teed it up, what made you unsure? Maybe concerned might be too strong of a word, but what had you uneasy before today? What were you questioning, and what did today specifically do to allay those concerns you had?
I think the biggest thing is that I'm ready to say this is going to be a good defense. Like, I think it's going to be a really good defense. And there were a couple times in the first week where like the running game was popping some big runs, and I'm like, okay, well that's a little disconcerting, and it made you kind of wonder. You do have new linebackers, and you did lose a couple guys up front on the defensive line, and so you start wondering about that. I felt really good about the secondary all the way through, but I started kind of getting a little concerned about that. But I felt like towards the end of last week, it sounds like it happened in the scrimmage on Saturday. And then also I thought, today for the most part, that I feel like this defensive front is really starting to assert itself. The linebackers to me, it's not just coach speak. I mean, Mike Norvell and Randy Shannon both have spoken in the last week about how, and Adam Fuller as well, the DC, they've all really talked up that linebacking core. And I think sometimes if you're not able to see practice, like in the past when we couldn't see practice, you wonder, are they just talking those guys up to give them confidence? Is it just, just platitudes? I think they're playing really well. I think the linebackers I think Cam Riley's made a huge difference. But I also think Omar Graham's playing well. Cryer, Blake Nicholson, that whole group is playing well. And DJ Lundy's still kind of working his way back into it. So now if that defensive front is solid, I love the secondary. I mean, I could not be higher on the secondary, not just the starters, but the backups. I love, like Adam Fuller said after the scrimmage, from 1 to 17 or 18, whatever it is, he likes all their DBs, and I'm with him. And so I think that, to me, just kind of coming to terms with, okay, this defense is going to be really solid. That, to me, it's just, okay, you can hang your hat on that. I know the running game is going to be good. We'll see how the passing game evolves over the course of a season. But, I just think those two things, if you've got really good special teams, the defense I feel very good about, and a good running game, I think you're in good shape.
I figured you'd be in a good mood today because Shaheen Brown was all over the place.
Man, that might have been it. Honestly, if we want to boil it all down, Tom, that might have been it.
So when Elijah Moore, and I'm saying when Elijah Moore is a focal point of practices and camps to come, and he is already getting a lot of love as a true freshman, but clearly there's a ways to go for him to get up to speed and get some more important reps. But when those days happen, that's how I'm going to feel walking off the practice field going, what a day. And it could be a bad day, but if Elijah Moore dominates, well, hell, there it is. That guy's on my team. Shaheen Brown has been on your team forever and a day. And I think if you were going to hand out a Heisman, even though it doesn't go to defensive players, for today, an MVP award for the day, you'd say that Shaheen Brown made the biggest difference at practice today. Is that fair, or is it somebody else?
He was unreal. It was by him by far. And I'm trying to remember the last time. And again, it's not fair because we weren't watching a lot of full practices or any full practices when Jimbo was here. But man, I cannot remember a DB dominating like the way Shaheen Brown dominated today. I mean, he had to make. I can go back through the list, but he had to make 7 or 8 just like fantastic plays. And a lot of times you talk about safeties, you don't notice a safety maybe unless they get beat. Man, he made plays all over the place. He whether it was, they ran a couple of misdirection things, kind of a little trickeration, and he was all over it. He broke on a couple passes to break him up, including one. I mean, I was sure it was a completion for 30, 35 yards, and he just came out of nowhere and swatted it away. And that goes on top of all the he had a couple nice plays in run defense. I mean, just he was unbelievable. He was as dominant to me. He was as dominant as a safety could be in a practice. Especially, they did a lot of 11 on 11, and man, it was something else. I don't know that you're not going to have many days like that because you're not going to get as many opportunities. But man, every opportunity he had, he made the play. It was a lot of fun to watch.
So I do want to talk a little bit more about the different levels of the defense to get at why you believe that this is. You now can rest assured in your own mind, like, this defense is going to be good. They're going to do the job necessary. Briley asked a question. We'll go early to a question here about safeties. And he was asking just about outside of Shaheen, where do you feel that safety play is in terms of players who have highest potential versus most consistent? I would imagine, for example, this is my own editorializing, that Conrad Hussey in the highest potential department is probably at or near the top of the list. But how would you sort it out outside of Shaheen? Because that's a very important job to be won.
Yeah, no, I think Conrad Hussey is definitely the guy with the most upside of that group of safeties. But they're all playing pretty well. I mean, Devontae Brown's playing pretty well. Ashley Barker made some plays today. He's playing pretty well. KJ Kirkland had an interception. It was kind of a gimme. It was an overthrown pass, but he caught the interception, and he made a couple other plays as well. So I think all those safeties are playing pretty well. I think Hussey's the future, and he might be the president. He might be the president as well. I mean, the thing about that kid is, man, and I'm not saying the other guys are not competitive, but the thing I love about Hussey, and I was going to include it in my observations, but as you said, it was already a novel, so I didn't want to compare. I may post something on the boards about it, but we'll give it here first to the Smash listeners. But there was a cool moment. DJ had about a 15, 20-yard run. DJ Uyunglele had a nice run in practice, and and again, he's not Jordan Travis, but he can move, and it was a nice run. And I guess they whistled it after about 20 yards. Well, Hussey comes over towards the sideline, and he starts chirping at one of the, and I don't know if he was even on the field at the time. I think he might have been watching. He might have been off the field, but he starts chirping at a support staff member, telling him, "This is ridiculous. Why are they running him? We can't hit him. He's got a green jersey on. This is nonsense. We would have knocked him out." And the support staff member says, "Well, it wouldn't have mattered because you can't tackle him anyway." And I mean, you weigh 195, 200 pounds. He weighs 245. And Hussey got so mad. And he was like, "You are crazy." He's like, "My helmet on his knee. I'm taking him down." And he was just like, it was almost like he felt offended that DJ gets to run and they don't get to hit him. And again, this is a teammate. They love the guy. But the Conrad Hussey's got a little, and you've seen it, man. When you've been in practice, when he gets into it with offensive players, sometimes it's a little on the edge, man. That kid gets on the edge a little bit. I think the assignments and all that's coming as well. I think Conrad Hussey's going to be really, really good, and I know he's the future. I think he might end up being the present.
Heart on his sleeve probably doesn't even cut it for Conrad Hussey. It's like heart on the lapel. He's a very, very passionate player. And obviously you want to have an enforcer type over the middle. Like I thought when Akeem Dent was at his best at his time at Florida State, there are several games you could point to where he's an enforcer type over the middle. Not the least of which was Miami 2021. Like that game, you could see that receivers thought twice about going over the middle. I think that's where Hussey's game is going to take him. And if you talk to some people in circles near the program, Ira, off the record about athleticism, his name is near the top of the list as well in that category across the roster. No matter the position, they say that he's a freak of an athlete. So again, once it all comes down to the game slowing for him and it making sense with consistency, I think he is the future. The question is how quickly can that happen? And they were smart, Ira, to go dip into the portal to grab a Devontae Brown, to bring Amarian Cooper back into the fold. To kind of usher in that bridge between the now and the later. And they'll rotate guys in there too. It's not like they wouldn't rotate an Ashlyn Barker in. Let's just say that the future was now. I don't think Hussey would play every single snap. I think they'd rotate some other guys in there as well.
Yeah, and I was just about to bring up Duke Cooper too. I didn't mention him. He had a nice play today. At least good coverage. He had really good coverage on a play. And, and again, you have to assume that that's coming now. Not only had he not been at Florida State for the last year when he was at Colorado, but he is really now making that transition that they wanted him to make 2 years ago from corner to safety. And so, I think I was thinking, man, the guy's played so much college football. They have a need at that safety spot. He might come in and win that job right away. I don't know. He may end up winning that job this season, but I don't think it's going to be right away. And he's definitely having to battle his way up through that depth chart. But I think he can play and be part of that answer too. But yeah, I think it's going to be it's going to be Shaheen and then a step down to everybody else. But I feel like that next group, you've got a lot of guys who can play there and feel comfortable that they're on the field.
So you're in love with the secondary, though. So I got to go to
Yeah.
corner. And okay, I didn't even get the question out.
Edwin Joseph today had a play real quick. Tom, he had a play today. He's covering Malik Benson, and he's behind him, and it's one of those where he comes over the top to deflect the pass, but doesn't interfere. He keeps the left hand off him, which is like, man,
that takes immense control. Yeah,
that's Matrix stuff, and it's like, dude, that dude's that group, Hussey, Edwin Joseph, Jabril Rawls, those guys that came in last year are really going to be special. And I just think, and Quindarius Jones, I mean, I don't mention him, but he's might be at the top of the list right now. He's probably your third best corner on the team. That group of freshman DBs is going to be something special. But again, I think you're going to see them on the field a lot this year.
It's hard to assess in practice, and games take on a life of themselves, especially when things are live. We get that, the running game, it's hard to assess when a whistle is blown. Would that have been a gain of 4? Would that have been a gain of 20? Quarterback sacks, the same. But just your thoughts on the secondary's attacking of the football, like turning around, finding the football. Are they getting better at that? Because, there have been years where in recent history, Florida State's been good in coverage, but not necessarily coming away with the football. How would you assess what you've seen so far with that? Because a player like, for example, Azareye'h Thomas, he played both ways in high school, and you could tell that he's got the offensive mindset to go attack the football. What about this younger crop, and what are you seeing out of the secondary with that?
Yeah, no question. And I mean, and again, that group that's coming behind them, the Charles Lester, Kai Bates, and those guys are impressive as well. But yeah, I think it's two things. I mean, I think it's mindset, but I also think it's ability. People were right to get mad. I think that the Florida State DBs never turn around to find the ball. But I also think part of that is a lack of ability / confidence, and knowing you can make those plays. Because when you turn around for the ball, like there's a chance you're going to get beat for a long play. Like if you're not in position, if you're not perfectly in position, and if you don't make a play on that ball, you could get beat. It's safer to just try to get in phase with them, stay with them, and then try to rip the ball out as it's coming down. But I think it's a combination of Patrick Surtain being a much more aggressive DBs coach. He wants those guys to be, and he's talked about it, he wants them to be to attack the ball like it's their ball. And that's how he played. He wants them to go get the ball. If they can't intercept it, then at least knock it out, but not just be passive. And then the other part of it is I think they've just got much better players. And so these guys, I think, are more often in phase, and they're also more willing because they're confident in their abilities. So yeah, I think there's much more of that. I mean, when you see pass breakups now, it's not because the pass was off the target. It's like the DB is making plays on a well-thrown ball against a good route. And that's a difference. I mean, I just don't think we saw a lot of that, those last few years.
So again, you're watching the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Vorhis. We have a YouTube that is Warchant TV only special. So I guess if you're watching on X or Facebook as well, go to warchant.com. If you're a new subscriber, use the code FSU1, FSU and the number 1 for 2 months for just $1 of warchant.com. Please do. We would love to have you aboard. And 2 months of coverage gets you to the Clemson game at this point. Clemson game for $1. From now till then, there'll be so much happening at warchant.com. We would appreciate your business. Ira, at linebacker, I did find it interesting too. I don't know if you asked the question or not on Saturday after the scrimmage, Adam Fuller's first appearance before the media. We usually get the lunch in and maybe another interview before the first scrimmage. But he was happy. He says they're good. He likes the different options they have, the different skill sets. I mean, standing next to you at practice for several camps over the last few years, when Bethune or Deloach weren't out there, you could kind of sense that they weren't out there. You could see maybe a drop-off. What makes you feel better this year? Like, I know what it looked like when they weren't on the field last year. Why is it different this time around? And what do you think about that room in terms of how many guys will they rotate potentially in the season? And could they trust in the throes of a game?
Well, if you think back to last year, so you had Tatum Bethune and Kalen Deloach, and then DJ Lundy was the third linebacker, basically a third starter. And then after that, it was a lot of young guys. And Omar Graham was supposed to be the fourth guy, but he was a little bit banged up, I think, an ankle. They ended up having to play Nicholson some more than they wanted to because I think they just felt like they needed to rush him along. when we talk, if you get a chance, go back and watch. I don't know if you watched them, people that are watching this, if you haven't watched it yet, go back and listen to the interviews last week with Justin. We got Justin Cryer and Blake Nicholson the same day. Those guys were both freshmen last year, and both in separate conversations talked about how completely lost they were last season. Like that, that in terms of not knowing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Cryers in his, he came in the summer. He had originally enrolled in Northwestern, comes in the summer, didn't have anything other than preseason camp. And he goes, I remember talking to you guys last year at this same moment in preseason camp, and you guys were asking me questions. He goes, and if you go back and watch it, I'm just making stuff up. He's like, I didn't know what we were doing. He goes, I'm just making stuff up. And Nicholson, he was here in the spring before, but he was a running back in high school. Like, he's learning to play linebacker. And he talked about when he got into games last fall, he would just like kind of look up at the crowd and find himself like spacing, just not being in the moment. So those two guys are completely different now. Like, they know how to play the position. Umar Graham, I think, is healthier now. Cam Riley is a big deal, man. That guy can play. He started, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 games, whatever it was at Auburn over the last couple of years. He looks great. I mean, I've been really impressed by him. But the biggest thing is, like, there were a couple of runs today where I think it might have been back-to-back runs where Cryer stuffed a run at the line of scrimmage, then Blake Nicholson and a couple of defensive linemen stuffed a run at the line of scrimmage. And it's like, you just get the sense that they know where they're going. If you walk, sometimes when those guys were on the field last year, man, it felt like they were either guessing where they were supposed to be going or they just didn't see it. Like, you had too many times when those guys were on the field, they're going to the wrong hole or there's just miscommunication. You don't see as much of that anymore. So that makes me feel a whole lot better. That was the one big question I had with this group was, I think there might be more talent. I've said this, more talent on this defense top to bottom than there was on last year's team, even with all those guys that got drafted. But it's just, a lot of that talent is in those younger guys, and how quickly can they get like just consistent and know what they're supposed to do. And you're seeing really good signs of that. I also thought that they made some really nice plays in coverage. I thought, several nice plays in coverage, which again, that's always a big question mark with Florida State's linebackers.
Juice Cryer could easily become a fan favorite. I know in the Florida State circles, Ira, he's beloved, because he's responsible. All the little things, they matter to him. And if you look at his social media, I don't know, I haven't checked it in a few weeks, but there's a Q&A. His cover photo is a screenshot of the linebacking core getting dogged, publicly getting dogged. And so he puts the bulletin board material on his social media page for the world to know that's not this linebacking core is not a liability whatsoever. So you want a linebacker to have that type of mentality. And to your point, I'm not picking on the kid, but it's an easy example to remember. If you go back to the showcase last year and you watch some of the plays early on, specifically for Sean Murphy, Alabama transfer, there's a touchdown from Lawrence Toafili early in that game before they get into the full up and down the field. And you can see he's thinking. You could see he's trying to think about where to be. He's trying to calculate things instead of just playing fast, free, and loose. And that matters so much in football, Ira, but specifically at the linebacker position, it's unbelievably critical. I mean, look at the difference between Kalen DeLoach in 2021 and 2023 and tell me that fast and free doesn't make a humongous difference in production. So I guess that's what you're getting at here, is that there's not as much thinking going on, and it's just I'm going to play because I know where I'm going.
Yeah, and the thing is, you don't know when a guy's a freshman. Like, you don't know, is it going to come? Like, we don't know. I'm sure Randy Shannon and Adam Fuller and that staff and Mike Norvell, they probably knew based on the conversations in the meeting rooms, conversations on the sideline. Why did things not work? Why did you make that decision? And they could probably understand it. But when we're watching, you just see a running back or a linebacker go to the wrong hole or trigger late, like you're talking about, or things like that after the play is already happening. And we don't know, is that ever going to change, or is that who that guy is? Well, I think from what we've seen in preseason camp, I feel like you're seeing that's not who those guys are. And to your point, Sean Murphy's another good example, man. In the spring, I didn't even know how to factor him in. I thought maybe he's a year away from really helping, but he's looked totally different in this preseason camp. So yeah, man, they'll run a bunch of different guys out there, and you're not seeing a huge drop off when anybody's off the field. So again, I'm not trying to tell everybody this is the next great linebacking core of all time, but when you get DJ Lundy healthy, which he should be soon, he's already working his way back in, and then you've got Cam Riley, and then you've got Nicholson, Cryer, and then those other guys, Murphy and those other guys behind them. I just think it's got a chance to be a really solid linebacker group.
It's encouraging to me to hear that linebacker room is impressing without DJ Lundy being on the field at all times. Like to me, if it was, well, Lundy is having a hell of a camp, and then the rest is all, we'll see. But that he's easing in, and that's been publicly declared that he's easing his way up to full speed. That they have answers outside of him, Ira. I mean, those reps are so valuable. You don't necessarily want to draw it up that way, but if it's going to work out that way, it's all the better for these guys and to speed up their development.
Yeah, and Cam Riley was huge. I mean, that to me, it was an unheralded signing, I think, because it came late. And because he lost his starting job at Auburn. I think you felt like, okay, was it, I don't know, some people wonder maybe it was a desperation move. Like maybe they're just throwing something against the wall here and see if it sticks. He lost his job at Auburn, transfers to NC State. Now he transfers to Florida State. And you're thinking maybe he's damaged goods or what, you just don't know what it's going to be. But man, I talked to some people around the program in the summer and late spring and in the summer. And one of the things they talked about was, this guy had 4 defensive coordinators in 4 years. Now there's no guarantee it's going to work here, but that's a pretty good excuse. And then he loses his starting job with whatever happened last year. New coaching staff comes in, and now he's getting a fresh start, and it's his last chance. So he's going to be motivated and focused. And I think if you didn't have him and DJ Lundy was limited early in the camp, I think you'd be a little bit nervous. But I think Cam Riley, has been huge for that group.
So the way he plays, that's the thing. There's some clips you can find of him getting downhill, making plays in the backfield at Auburn. Obviously he played a lot of games, Ira, but just the way he moves at that size, how would you characterize his fluidity? Do you think he's more of a thumper? Can he turn his hips and go and cover? Like, what has been impressive about the way that he moves on the field and the way he plays?
Yeah, I would say more than anything, it's been more of the getting downhill.
Yep.
It's been more of the, taking a good angle and being that rangy and that long and getting out into the flats quickly, getting out to the edge, or, shooting the gap. I mean, he is a downhill football player. I haven't seen him in coverage as much, but I also haven't seen him get beat in coverage as much either. It's not like that's a red flag to me right now, but when he flashes, yeah, man, it's when he's coming downhill, triggering. One thing I thought was really cool today, and again, it didn't make observations, but it was I thought it was a cool thing. There was a play during practice where they're all communicating, and he points to where it ended up being a pass in the flat to a running back, and he pointed there before the play, and he was on the other side, so he wasn't the guy that made the play. I think one of the safeties came up and made the play, but you could tell before the snap he was pointing to where the ball was going to go. And again, man, this guy's only been here for a couple months, so he's obviously put in the time to learn the defense, and he, when they're communicating, like, he's giving the right signs. You can just tell, like, when he gives his hand gestures and things like that, like, he's on the right page with these other linebackers and DBs. And again, I think that's all a really positive sign when you think the guy's only been here a couple months.
So we do need to finish out talking about the defense because, again, the headline to me today early on, and Seminole Headlines, there's your segue, tomorrow here on Warchant TV at 1 o'clock right here. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you don't know what Seminole Headlines is and you're brand new to the Warchant TV network, tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock. You're going to love what you see because it's a great discussion about where Florida State is in camp. But Ira, you're talking about your comfort level with the defense. I found one statement that many statements, but one in particular, I think it was the last exchange, penultimate exchange with Adam Fuller at the scrimmage regarding defensive tackles. And he says they've got 6 guys that they trust, 6 guys that they believe can rotate in and out. He says, don't be surprised if we stagger Darrell Jackson with somebody else or Josh Farmer with somebody else. They might play together, but they might put some different skill sets on the field at the same time. You could take that one of two ways and both could be true. One way is they've got a bunch of different skill sets. Tomi Wadura-Ajayi is a little bit different than Josh Farmer, and Grady Kelly is a little bit different than Daniel Lyons. And so you don't want those guys out there at the same time. Or you could take it as, we know we've got two really good players, and we don't want them both off the field at the same time if we're making substitutions. What do you think about defensive tackle, what you've seen so far, and that explanation from Adam Fuller? Do you think that they're trying to make sure that they've got one game breaker on the field at all times, or is it that they have a ton of options and they just, they want to cultivate a plan of rotation against from opponent to opponent based upon the strengths they have?
I think it's more that, and I also think it's going to be a work in progress. I think they're going to I believe that they're going to like work and try to find. It's almost like finding the right lineup in baseball. Like they're going to keep working with different combinations to see what works best over the course of a game, because they do have 6 quality defensive tackles. I really believe that. Grady Kelly's a solid college football defensive tackle. You wouldn't feel great if he was your number 1 guy at Florida State, but he's definitely can be in your top 4. KJ Sampson, the way he's come along, Daniel Lyons, I think is having a good camp. And then Durajaye as well. And obviously Josh and Daryl are the top 2 guys. I also think it wouldn't be a bad thing for Daryl to be out there by himself. This is just me, 5 cent psychologist. It wouldn't, I don't know if it wouldn't be a good thing for Daryl Jackson to be out there without Josh sometimes, because I think like Josh, I think is the leader of those 2. And I think if Josh is out there, Daryl may, I don't know. I just wonder if Daryl like defers to Josh a little bit. Whereas if Daryl's out there with another dude, now he's got to step up and be the alpha. And so, again, there could be different things there. It could be skill sets. It could be, we want these 2 on first down and second down. We want these 2 on third down. And there could be a lot of different factors there. But as I just started talking through it, I don't think it would be a bad thing for Daryl to be out there and to see how he does in that role. Like when he's the guy that's supposed to make the play or lead the surge, how he handles that. I think that might be, so it may be a lot of mixing and matching early in the year to figure out what works best.
Well, and it makes sense. Again, they've got a lot of different types of guys that are, the motors are different. Every down and situation, Ira, is different too, every opponent. So it makes sense that there could be a lot of shuffling there. So we have to finish it out with edge rushers. Old batted balls, Peyton, we know what he is. Set it and forget it. And that's not dismissing the potential greatness of one Patrick Peyton. But the rest of the guys on the edge, where do they stand out to you? Maybe just some moments that you've seen from either Marvin Jones, Sione Lolahea, Byron Turner, Aaron Hester, I've seen in the practice reports a lot. What do you make of that rotation against your expectations? Because Florida State dipped into the portal heavily to fortify this particular position. What do you think about those guys and what stood out from what you've seen from maybe each of them over the course of 10 practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think Marvin is what we thought he was in the spring, and I think he's going to be. He's a dynamic athlete, pass rusher with great size and length, and can do different things. I think in the spring we saw him be used in a couple different roles. Obviously at Georgia, he sometimes was a stand-up linebacker, and sometimes he was rushing the passer. I think he and Patrick Payton are going to be phenomenal as pass rushers. Lolahea, like the first few days in camp, I think I talked with Jeff about this, maybe even on the Smash or on Headlines last week, that like the first few days when they're not in full pads and you see Lolahea, just he doesn't stand out to you. But like once you start playing in pads and there's real physical contact, you see like that dude is so strong, man. Like he is such a strong, such a low base and really can play well in the center of it. Now he's not a guy that's going to rack up 6, 7, 8 sacks, but he can really play and set the edge and get a surge. So you like him a lot. Durajaye is probably somewhere between those two. Like he's not a sports car like Peyton and Marvin Jones Jr., but he's not a Mack truck like Lolahea. I think he's a little bit between the two. And then Hester is a guy that, like you said, man, he just makes plays. I was a doubter of Hester just because of the measurables. Like you just don't see a lot of 6'2" defensive ends unless they're, super freaks. But this kid's pretty twitchy, man. Like he's twitchy, he can really bend, and he can make plays. The play, probably the best play Hester made today. We've all, I don't know. over the last 5 years, well, shoot, going back to Charles Kelly, it's college football now. You'll see plays where the defensive ends end up having to cover running backs out of the backfield. And
Yeah, sure.
usually it leads to a lot of wincing from fans. Like, how could you end up doing that? There's a play today where Hester comes out and he's covering a skill guy, and I think it was Jalen Lucas. When Hester was right with him. I mean, he was running with him. And then as soon as Lucas went to put up his hands, Hester he didn't face guard him. He just kind of put out his arms to the side, and he broke up the pass just by being in phase and reading when the hands went up. He got his hands up, and he ended up breaking up the pass. He's a natural football player. So, like, to me, I'm not married to measurables, but in general, you have an idea of what you want to see as a defensive end. His height and weight combination doesn't scream that that's going to be a really, just a playmaker. But I won't be surprised at all if he's in games this year and makes some impactful plays. He is a twitchy kid and really has good football instincts.
He is quick. In the practices I've seen, even when he was first on campus a while back, you could tell that whatever that timing is, like, he has to have it. Because if you don't have it at his size, you're not at Florida
No
State.
chance. Right.
So you have to have a knack if you're going to be that size. And we'll see how often Florida State gets into maybe some sub packages in third down and who they turn to in those situations. Because even Cam Riley, some of that tape, Ira, from elsewhere and earlier in his career, he seems like he might be somebody who in third and passing, you might put out there not to be a linebacker, but to be more helpful with an edge rush as well. So that is a comprehensive look at Florida State's defense. There's going to be, I think, the first question that we're going to take on the other side of the break, which is coming up in just a moment. Short break as it is on the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, will be about the defense. But it is going to have to be, at least in my opinion, Ira, the group that will have to carry the day for Florida State. It's not to say that the offense can't be explosive, consistent, and might not have a really fun image and identity about ground and pound. But let me ask you this, because I think for Florida State to get to 10, 11, more wins than that over the course of a season and a postseason, the defense has to be the one to set the tone. Last year, we thought it was the defense has to come along for the ride. They ended up setting the tone more than we expected. But I feel like this year, it has to be Adam Fuller's group that leads the way and gives Florida State opportunities to get hot on offense. What do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely early in the year. And again, like that scrimmage Saturday, it was hard to get a read from talking to the coaches afterwards right away. Cause I think that Adam Fuller clearly felt pretty good about the defense performance, and there was the one long drive that I had to ask him about, which ticked him off. But other than that, I think he felt good about the defense. He didn't like some of the missed tackles, and there are some other little things that he's going to harp on as a defensive coordinator, but it sounded like they kind of controlled the action. And I think that's what it's going to be probably early in the year. I think this defense, especially a game like, these early games where they're not gimmies. Georgia Tech's not a gimme. BC would be a gimme probably, and it might still be a gimme, but it's falling in a weird spot. You're coming back from Ireland. It's going to be on a Monday night. It's just going to be a little bit different of it. So in these games where you're probably not going to be super sharp offensively, I think they're really going to lean on that defense. I think certainly early in the year. Now I think there's potential on this offense to get much better, and especially the running game is going to be solid, but I think the passing game has potential to evolve and become dynamic. But I think early in the year, man, I think the defense is going to have to carry the day, and I feel good about that. Like I feel like the front seven I think is going to be really solid, and then that secondary I think is going to be pretty spectacular.
We were on even footing for the scrimmage because we both watched it, meaning the press conferences, but not the scrimmage itself. So I'll tell you my thoughts about that, and then we'll get into your questions here on the Monday Smash, presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. 15 seconds from Russ right now.
Contact Russ Voorhis for an auto quote today.
Russ is the man in the insurance game, and just like that, Irish Rafael is the man in the coverage game of Warchant.com and Warchant TV, and he's giving us all of his insights tonight. So, Ira, to give your voice a little bit of a break, here's my thought on what I heard out of Adam Fuller on Saturday, because he was ticked off when you asked him about the 20-play drive. And I think he's half ticked off at the question and half ticked off about the drive, because it seems to me the way he described it, there were a couple, by his definition, his perspective, lucky things that had to happen for the drive to prolong. He's talking about, well, there was a quarterback scramble, a nickel and dime play.
Yeah.
We had a guy tackled at the 6-yard line. He breaks 5 tackles. Like, I feel like he's like, lucky clovers were out there in full force on that drive for us to not be able to get off the field. Also, we had to rotate a lot of players. So he's going through the motions in his head of all the nonsense that has to happen for a 20-play drive to be successful and end up in the end zone. It reminds me, Ira, of a drive summary you would see if you're watching CBS Sports Network and Army's playing. You know, it's a Service Academy, Georgia Tech under Paul Johnson type drive. A lot of 3rd and 2s, 4th and 1s that are converted, things like that. They have to go right. They have to fall into place. So he's mad about it, Ira, because I think, this is my own opinion, my own take on his attitude there, he thinks that they played really well on Saturday. And like, this is the one omission from a darn near perfect effort or very good effort. Even though Adam Fuller himself, in his opening statement, his early answer says we've got to get better at X, Y, and Z, I think the competitor in him comes out in that moment when you ask him about the 20-play drive. And he's like, well, hold on now. We were awesome tonight, and this one thing happens, and it was lucky to boot, and we were really good. But sure, let's talk about our failure tonight.
I think you're
we were very good on Saturday. Well, what do you think?
No, I think you're accurate. And then talking to people afterwards, it sounds like the defense played really well. And, you know, it didn't really dawn on me. Sometimes we notice things when we go to practice, we notice things that are happening. Sometimes we don't notice the things that aren't happening. And what I mean by that is, as I think about it, you don't see Adam Fuller or Randy Shannon or Papuchis and Odell, the defensive staff, you don't see them coaching a lot from play to play in terms of assignment, alignment, that stuff. Like, and in years past you did, you know, maybe you didn't see it much last year, but when you think about this as a defense, it's got a lot of new faces. You don't see them having to correct a lot of that kind of stuff. And the communication, I think, is very good. Now, when the second, third group is out there, sometimes you'll see it more. But you don't see a lot of that. And I think he's got a group, not to say that they play perfectly every play or that they don't make mistakes, but I think he feels like he's got a group of guys that understand his defense and play really hard. And I think the expectation is that they're going to dominate. Like, I think you're right. I think he thinks they're going to dominate. And if they don't dominate, it's because of their fault, not because of what the offense did.
We have a thank you to offer out there, and I've been remiss because I had a different tab open. But James B., my goodness, thank you so much for the contribution. We have the question starred. You go in the same spot. But my man, James B., smash it up, he says, with a large contribution to the program. Tom, so sorry you had to come back to face a hurricane. But, hey, that's Florida. I understand it, James B., especially in the Panhandle in the last 10 years. You know, when I went to school here, it was, well, you're fine. It's been since the 80s. Tallahassee or the Big Bend every year now. It's just the way it is, James B. Ira, I'm just so concerned about Hakeem. Is he showing any improvement? I know you can't be too specific. Ira, I'll extrapolate that out too, because Coach Norvell's answer about the receivers you asked him the question on Saturday after the scrimmage, you know, are you seeing after 9 practices what you needed to see? And it sounds like the answer was no. Like they're in position to make plays, but they're not finishing with consistency. So how would you make sense of what James B is asking about?
Yeah, no, I think with Hakeem, we've seen signs of it. You know, and I think it's going to be where you see it consistently every day. And then when we see it in games, I'll say this: at the end of the spring, I was not real high on Hakeem because he got into so much better shape last year, and it continued in the spring. But I just didn't see him making a lot of plays. Like in the Georgia game, he got some opportunities and didn't really make plays when he came back from his injury. And then in the spring, I just didn't see him making a lot of plays, especially those one-on-one balls. That's where I was kind of down on that group, but also on him. You just weren't seeing him go up and just go get the ball. Talking to people in the offseason, you know, around the program, you know, one of the things that was brought up to me a little bit was just, you know, you got to remember that Hakeem had no real coaching in high school. You know, he played at a not a very good high school football program. He didn't go to St. Thomas Aquinas. And some of those big schools, Chaminade and those big schools, would have loved him to transfer there. where he could have gotten great coaching and probably been a more polished receiver, but he liked the staff I think he was at, the school he was at, and stayed there, but never really got better. He was just, and he's talked about this, he was bigger and stronger and faster than everybody he went against. And so he just basically just ran out. He didn't have to polish his routes. I say all that to say, in this preseason camp, I've seen more out of Hakeem Williams than I felt like I've seen in the first year and a half he's been here. I think he's getting there. I think he's getting really close. Now it's just a matter of consistency and carrying it over to games. But I think it's coming. The receiver room as a group, though, is like from a big picture standpoint. I really like the young guys. Tom, I thought today, and if you read the observations, you could see Cam Fryer makes a lot of plays. Your guy Elijah Moore makes a lot of plays. BJ Gibson is starting to flash. You're starting to see him make some plays. I think there are certain plays that really suit him well. So I don't know that he can do everything yet, but there are certain plays that really suit him well. So I like the young receivers. I like Malik Benson. I like Hakeem, how he's coming on. That group between them is the group that's got to step up. Kentron Portier and Darren Williamson and that obviously Ja'Kai is part of that top group. He can play and you can depend on him. But then that next group, like they got to get something more out of that next group. And, if they do, like Darren Williamson, I thought had a couple nice plays today, but there are other days where you don't see it. There are days where Kentron's there and there's days when he's not. So that to me is, I like the young receivers. Love Malik Benson. But and I think Hakeem has a chance to get there, but there's in the middle, they're not as consistent as they need to be.
What you're saying is what I heard out of Coach Norvell in the answer to that question. It's like, he's saying, you're right there. You're on the precipice, but I need to be able to trust you. And then he's asked about Elijah Moore on Saturday towards the end of his availability. He says, well, that guy, he's not afraid of the moment. He's finishing plays. It's almost as though there's a subtext there in his answer saying, unlike some of these guys, I'm begging to finish this freshman who's too raw for me to push into action right now, but he's got that, which is missing from the guys who have been around and do know the playbook.
So perfect example today, perfect illustration today, and it was in my observations, but I didn't put it into context, probably all that great. But Quindarius Jones had 2 breakups against Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore 2 times was going up against Quindarius. Now, again, Elijah Moore, like these freshman receivers, maybe they made plays the first week or 2 against other freshman DBs, but now he's going up against Quindarius Jones, who's been here for a year and a half as their number 3 corner, is not much further behind those other guys. And Quindarius broke up those 2 passes. A few plays later, they did a red zone pass, and he goes up, and it's basically a 50-50 ball. He makes a great play. As he's coming down, Quindarius Jones is grabbing it to try to wrestle it away from him. And Elijah Moore wrestles it away from him, completes the catch for the touchdown, and then gets up and starts wolfing at Quindarius. And so, yeah, man, he's going to be that guy. It's just how quickly can he get there? How quickly can Amari Williams get? Amari, dude, that kid is a phenom.
He's in every practice report, Ira. He's in every practice observations. What's the deal with that guy?
That kid is going to be a phenom, man. He is. But again, it's like, so there's this race for how quickly can you get those guys in there. Cam Fryer kind of had a slow start to camp. I think he was dealing something. He's really come on. He had 2 or 3 really nice catches today. So it's like, can the defense in the running game, get you and those the receivers that they can count on get you maybe the middle of the season or whenever it is that maybe those young guys can really step in. I like the future of that room. It's just how quickly can they get there?
I love that part of the observations that you can find on warchant.com if you're a subscriber with Quindarius Jones and Elijah Moore. That's the all T-Lang team right there. That's my starting DB. That's my starting wide. Oh, man, those are 2 of my guys. Let's get to the questions now. The Godfather Ed Lemick's asking about point spreads, and he's talking about Florida State and Georgia Tech. Are we still comfortable with the 13-point line after seeing the scrimmage or getting reports about the scrimmage and hearing the coach's opinions and practice today? All right, so Ira feels better about the 13-point spread after today. He's told us as much about that. But what do you think? 2 touchdowns, game 1, is it too hard to tell? Or is it that, you see that Georgia Tech had a hard time stopping the run last year? Maybe it's as simple as that for Florida State. If they run the ball, they can cover.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that, Florida State's going to probably overwhelm them on the line of scrimmage. I mean, I just think Florida State's running game, I think, is going to be really good. That offensive line is no joke, man. It is, and I get it. People are going to want to see it, so they won't believe it till they see it, because last year's offensive line was not all that great, especially run blocking. But I really think you're going to be impressed by this run blocking group. I think they'll be able to kind of set the stage or set the tone with that running game. And I think the defense can be really good. Having said that, though, Georgia Tech's offense is good. And Haynes King is really talented and fits in what they want to do. They've got a good back. They've got a couple of receivers. So, like, I hate to say, like, that's a game I would not touch, because, like, you're also playing in Ireland, and it's a season opener with a new quarterback and DJ Uyunglele. So there's a lot of reasons why I could see Georgia Tech having success in that game. But if you just put the two teams physically side by side, I think Florida State's easily more than 2 touchdowns better than Georgia Tech. I just think there's some weird circumstances in that game that could make it a little hairier.
I don't know if you guys watch Better Call Saul or watched it, but Slippin' Jimmy's. I'm worried about the fields. Always overseas, I'm worried about the fields. Weird stuff happens in London. Certainly it can in Ireland as well. You see that with the NFL all the time. Michael Lee on Facebook. Offense wins games, but defense wins championships. How many points a game does the Florida State offense have to score for them to, 1, win the conference / make the playoffs, and then 2, not just make, but compete in the playoffs? I'm going to start with this one. Let's see if I hit the numbers that Ira's thinking of right now. For 1, I think the number's 27.
Man, I was thinking 27 or 28, I swear.
Okay, and you're thinking 31 or 35 for the next one, for the competition?
Yeah. I mean, I think, low 30s. Yeah. But I was honestly 27, 28 was where I was at. I just don't think many teams are going to score more than 4 touchdowns. I just don't think many teams are going to score more than 21 against this defense.
It's funny you say. I think you could get to Charlotte with averaging 24 in conference play, but that's too close. So I like a little bit more comfort, so we'll go with 27 or 28 points. Thanks for the question. Brett, is it too early to see who the top 3 or 4 wide receivers are? We were just kind of talking about this. Or are we still at 6 to 8 guys that are all very close? So I'm going to imagine, Ira, that Malik Benson and Ja'Kai Douglas are kind of in a secure place of their own. Am I wrong about that? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think they are. And I think, after that, it's more of a catch. But I'm putting Kyle Morlock with those 2. Like, to me, those 3 guys, Benson, Ja'Kai, and Morlock, to me, are your 3 dudes who you can count on. They're going to be there. They're going to make plays. They're not, they're going to do what you need to do. They're going to make some big time plays as well. Everybody after that, I think it's going to be different on different games. I haven't seen anybody separate. I think Hakeem could be the next one to separate, and everybody tells me Kentron will at some point. So maybe it'll happen. Corey wants me to believe it. I want to believe it, but I'm more inclined to think maybe Hakeem might be the next one to join that group.
Island Chief wants to know, who is the next underclassman to earn a starting job on the offensive line? Redshirt sophomores count. This is interesting because Alex Atkins did talk about some of those younger players and his availability today. Any thoughts on this one, Ira? This is a near and dear topic to my heart.
Of that group of third-year guys, and like you said, Alex Atkins did talk today. People can watch the video. He was asked about the third-year sophomores, Jalen Early, Julian Armella, and then you got the second-year guys, Andre Otto and Lucas Simmons. He said they're all right on course of where he wants them to be to possibly be starters next season, because they're going to lose so many seniors after this season. Jalen Early, to me, is the next guy of the younger group. Bryson Estes, I don't think qualifies. He's like a tweener. I think he's a redshirt junior. And so, he might be in that mix. I think Mike Norvell has said he was a little bit limited at times, but yeah, I think Jalen Early at tackle. Now I don't, you don't foresee them needing him to play. You got 3 good tackles: Darius Washington, Jeremiah Byers, and Robert Scott. I think Jalen Early is probably that 4th guy. And I think he's going to end up being a really, really good offensive tackle. And I think they'd be fine with him playing right now. I think Armella's just a hair behind him. Plus, that's a deeper position. So I'd give Early the nod.
I think, if you're looking for an underclassman to start next year, it'd be Otto or Simmons. I think both of them have a chance. Otto is so versatile. I think his chance is higher that he could play in many different positions on the O-line. But I'm interested, real quick, on Jalen Early. I might have caught him on a couple of bad days in the spring. They've been talking about him for a long time. Has he made a jump? Because you're not the first person I've heard say that, man, he's gotten better. Like he might be in that rotation. He could be in the mix if somebody goes down, and you wouldn't feel terrible about it. The coaching staff has been saying it's coming, but I guess it looks like he might have made a bit of a jump.
Yeah, I think it's coming. It's definitely coming. It's. And I was thinking about it the other day. There was a practice 2 years ago. I think you and I talked about it that day when he was a freshman. When he came in as a freshman, there was a day of practice where the trainers had taken him out of a drill because he was complaining about being injured or hurt. And I remember Alex Atkins saying to him, not even like meanly, but he was just like, "Yeah, man, it hurts. This is football practice. Everybody out here hurts. Like nobody's not hurting right now." It was like late in camp. And to think about where he came from at that point to now, when you see him at practice, leading a drill, running onto a field, just he is completely a different guy than what he was 2 years ago. I think it's a credit to him for buying into it and also to the staff. But yeah, and there's no doubt he's got the talent, the strength, the size. I think he's right there, man. I think he could play. If he went in the games, I think they'd be okay.
Rapid fire in the last few minutes here of the Monday Smash. Remember, Warchant.com is hitting the road. Ira Schafel is hitting the road this week, going to Jacksonville, provided Florida State does carry out the plan to go practice on the East Coast of the state on Wednesday and Thursday. You'll have all the coverage from us on Warchant.com and Warchant TV. Practice out in Jacksonville Wednesday, Thursday. Tomorrow is here. Practice is here in Tallahassee. But that's what's going on the rest of the week. If you have not subscribed, go to Warchant.com. Use the code FSU and the number 1, FSU1, for $1 for 2 months. Jump aboard Warchant.com. You don't want to miss all that's ahead in the next couple of months. So Briley is trying to thread the needle here. Ira, he wants answers about receiver. A lot of hand wringing. Don't see progression. We just hear still working for consistency. Is it as inconsistent as it was in the spring? The start of camp? Are they improving at all? Have they gotten it? Ira, is it the same damn thing over and over? Is the record skipping? Briley has to know. So what say you? So
my thing is, it's like, I don't know, man. I just kind of go back to the old. I remember like when Rick Trickett was here, and like it was early on, and he had like the same group of offensive linemen back, and he was like, "Yeah, we've got the same guys back, and that's not always a good thing." Like that was Rick Trickett saying that, and so, but I think that there's a little bit of you need to keep that in mind. Sometimes I think we as fans or media assume, if a guy's been in the program, like they're just going to get better and better and better until they're really good. And some guys just don't. Like, and so I'm not going to tell you that those guys can't, but it just hasn't happened. And so, it's like, in baseball, you've got a hitter, like, there's certain hitters where you see promise, but then it's just like there's stretches where they can't hit. And it's just, some players are just better players. It's not always about development. I guess that kind of goes back to my thing where like people will talk about, why aren't you developing players better? Man, I think it's development a lot of times overrated, man. Like Patrick Surtain is going to look like a much better developer of talent than he would if they didn't have a lot of really talented DBs coming in. And so I just think that that's a big part of it. I just think you look at that group of wide receivers that everybody's waiting and hoping for, how many of them had really produced at a high level before they came to Florida State? Darian Williamson was a diamond in the rough that they found. They hoped would be a diamond in the rough. They found Mark Houston, back in Tennessee that was off the recruiting radar, when they first got here. Kentron was a basketball player who is converted to football, and there are times he looks great. But then there are other times where he doesn't. So to me, it's like, I don't know, is that ever going to happen? I don't know, but I don't know if it's about development. That's just maybe who they are. I think that younger group of receivers, I think you're going to see those guys develop because you can see the talent.
I hear you. Briley, there's your answer. Ira says you got some dogs and they're in their teens. None of them are in their 20s. Yeah, you got some dogs.
And Hakeem, and again, Hakeem has proven me wrong. Because I didn't, after the first year in spring, I was like, man, I just don't know. Maybe he's not that guy, but he's come so far. Like you see him now kind of showing that. And he, again, like the difference is, I'm sure Cam Fryer's played receiver like his whole life. I don't know when I mean, his dad's Matt Fryer. And maybe Elijah Moore has played receiver for a while. You had some projects, whereas I think these younger guys coming up like look more ready. And BJ Gibson, when I was talking about him earlier, you can see like the outfielder skills, like he tracks the ball. He's got something. He's pretty smooth.
And he's strong too. So
Yes.
again, the limited stuff I'm seeing, but we have great footage on Warchant TV, and Aslan shoots somewhere between 8 to 12 minutes that we get every day. That's on the channel, and you'll find that tomorrow here on Warchant TV. Check all those videos out. They're a lot of fun. One of the early days of practice, they're going outside on the sled. The receivers are, and nobody. I mean, look, it takes effort. And I don't think all the guys want to be doing sled work as receivers. They want to catch passes. BJ Gibson is strong for a true freshman. My God, Florida State likes blockers on the outside. I know he's not the tallest guy in the world. Watch for that later in his career. Last couple of questions from Facebook. Lee asking about Sam Singleton. Is he getting praise due to guys getting reps while others are limited, or is Sam coming into his own, so to speak? So I don't know that you can answer the first part of that question, but what do you make of Sam Singleton getting more praise?
Well, I mean, between Norvell and Sam himself today, they said that they definitely gave him some extra reps because they were just trying to not use some of the older guys, and so he looked really good. I mean, he looked good in the spring. I thought he looked good in the spring game. I thought he looked good. There were times in the spring where when we would have that conversation, Jeff a few times in the spring would say somebody's going to transfer out of this running back room. Like, there's no way you're keeping 7 running backs. And the reason I pushed back at him is I was like, yeah, but I just don't know who's going to leave. Like, Sam Singleton was the only one that made any sense because he's coming into his second year. And maybe if he feels like Cam Davis is recruited and Mekhi Danzy and those guys are going to be recruited over him, then maybe that would be the window. But he has looked good. I mean, he looked good in the spring, and I think he's looked good, in this camp as well. So no, he can play. Now he's not. Again, he's a speed guy. He got a lot of credit in that game for in the scrimmage for his blocking and also for his physicality as a runner. I'm still not. He's not. He's not going to be Cam Davis, but he can run. I think he can play. I think he's part of the future of that running back room. And again, that running back room is super deep. It's 7 deep, but I think 4 of them are seniors. So a bunch of those dudes are going to be leaving. After at least 3 of them, maybe 4 of them are seniors. And so that he's going to be in that top group pretty soon next year.
And he's not slight. Like, to your point, he's not going to be a hallmark, truck you kind of guy, but he's not slight of build. I think for him, just from watching what I've seen so far, it's almost like the linebacker discussion we had. If the instinct starts to take over, the athleticism is really something to behold. But if he's thinking as he has the ball in his hand, then that could hold him back. But if that switch is flipped, it could be pretty special.
And he talked about that today as well in the interview today. He spoke to that specifically, that just how much more comfortable he is compared to a year ago.
Charlie, we have answered your question a little bit earlier, but I do want to put you up on the board. Haven't heard much about defensive end depth this fall. What's that competition like? If you joined us late, you can certainly circle back to it. We had a great long discussion about the defense, top to bottom, from safety all the way up to the defensive line. We appreciate your question, and thank you for submitting it here on Warchant TV. And the final question of the night from Carol. So if the offense is still figuring out the passing game, then what percentage of the running game to the percentage of passing do you predict will happen? So talking splits, out of 100%, how much do you think we're going to use Mike Norvell will call runs? Hope the running game comes to life to open up the passing game eventually. I think that's the plan, Carol, obviously, is to succeed on the ground. They've built this offensive line to be more girthy and to be more of a bully unit of 5, to allow success more often, consistent success on first and second down, and then play action off that. At least that's the way I take it, Ira, is how they're going to build that, especially with the speed over the top. But if you were to put percentages, let's say the game's in the balance, it's not garbage time, first 2-3 quarters of the game, 6 out of 10 runs, 65%. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think it might be closer to 55%, but you may be using the passing game as an extension of the running game. Obviously Mike Norvell's always, proven to be a really good screen designer and caller. And I think the screen game will be a part of it. I also think you'll see the backs. I just think here's what I do know for a fact, and this is not Mike Norvell saying this. This is not practice observations I'm throwing, putting out there, or company trade secrets. if you watched Mike Norvell's offense 2 or 3 years ago when they didn't have the receivers were not great before that group came in 2 years ago. If you go back to Mike Norvell's first couple of seasons at Florida State, when they didn't have really good receivers, he's going to throw to the backs. And so whether it's screens or whether it's them lining up as receivers in the slot, whether it's them lining up out wide, I think David Johnson said the other day, like that they've had, 4 running backs in the game together at a time. So they're if it's lacking at receiver, I think you're going to see more of those running backs get involved in the game and in the passing game as well. So I would say 55 to 60% running, but I think they will use the passing game as well, but maybe not. Maybe it's not all to wide receivers, I guess is my point. When they throw the ball, I don't think it's all going to be trying to take shots down to the wide receivers.
Just a guess here from looking at the showcase too, Ira. I think if you add run calls to RPO calls to jet motions to bubbles, you're looking at
70%. Yeah.
70%. The speed to the edges is also, criminal if you're a defensive coordinator facing Florida State. Like, you've got to be so aware of that. And if they just wanted to put Jalen Lucas in a jet motion on every play, that's a headache and a half, and whether they actually run it out of that or not. I think there's a lot of that coming this season. So, Ira, before we go, anything you want to tease? You're on the road in a day or so out to Jacksonville, but anything that you want to tease coming up tomorrow, practice coverage, or anything coming up this week on warchant.com?
Real quick, though, I want to follow up on what you just said. I just want to emphasize what you just said because we didn't talk about it all. But yeah, man, the speed at receiver is a big deal. And so while you may not have the possession receivers, you may not have the Keon or the Johnny in those 3rd and 13s or just kind of those special plays that we would see kind of between 10 to 25 yards. The fact that you do have the speed that they have outside, that if you can show you can hit some of those occasionally, that will kind of relax the coverage a little bit, push the safeties back a little bit more where they have to respect it. They can't just sell out to stop the run. If they didn't have that, I think the offense would be in a little bit of trouble because, you're just going to be running into numbers all day. But because you have that speed, I think that is, and DJ's huge arm, I think that's going to make teams play more honest. Yeah, man. So Aslan and I are going to hit the road to Jacksonville tomorrow evening. FSU. So there's practice Tuesday morning. We'll have plenty of coverage from that tomorrow during the day. Then we're going to go over to Jacksonville. They're practicing Wednesday and Thursday in Jacksonville. Tons of coverage from there. And then, there's some, besides all the team coverage we've got going on, we also have some recruiting stuff's coming up. The Petty kid, I think, is committing this weekend. Is that right?
Yeah, it's under a week from Josh Petty's decision, which is a monumental one for the 2025 class. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's a couple other recruits that they're in the mix for, so we've got stories about those guys coming as well, plus we'll have coverage of their recruitment. So, no shortage of content at warchant.com. And again, also the message boards, which are super active at this time of year with conversation for everything from practice to conference expansion and realignment and all that stuff as well. So come check it all out.
I think that conference expansion and realignment thread has like 10 views. And by that, I mean 11 million. I saw 11 million views on that thread on the Tribal Council right now.
It's a living organism. It
is. It's almost like the U.S. debt calculator website. Remember that? That's the way the view count goes on the Tribal Council. Thank you to everybody who's been a part of the show tonight. We really appreciate your contributions. James B., always so generous. You did not have to be, but we really appreciate you. To our sponsor, State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. Thank you for always kicking ass for us here on Warchant TV. Director Ben behind the scenes. He's Ira Schafel. My name is Tom Lang. Remember, warchant.com is your home for the best Florida State coverage. Go to warchant.com as a new subscriber. Use the code FSU1. And multimedia-wise, Wake Up Warchant coming at you. Fast, furious, and often here on our multimedia networks. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock here on Warchant TV live is Seminole Headlines and the Jeff Cameron Show, always throughout the week, too. So, for Ira and Ben, my name is Tom. Good night, everybody. This has been the Monday Smash, and we will talk to you next time right here on Warchant TV.